You're listening to the Platform Launchers podcast. I'm John Stange, and it's great to have you with us this week, as always, because we're going to be talking about building and growing and monetizing your online platform. We're going to talk about taking your passion, turning it into a platform so that that can become a paycheck that you use to bless your family and bless the organizations and ministries and churches that you care about. These are things that we care about as well. I want to invite you to stop over at platformlaunchers.com, where you can get a whole bunch of free resources and utilize some of the other tools that we have. You can also take a free 2-week test drive of our members club. That's our membership community where we build, grow, and monetize online platforms together. We give each other good ideas and good accountability and good information and really set each other up for success. And we'd love to have you as part of the group if that's something that would interest you. Again, stop over at platformlaunchers.com and you could check that out. Now, our theme this week is kind of a behind-the-scenes look. We're going to go behind the scenes at a large online media network. And I want to give you some personal experience or personal information, some things I've gleaned from working with one of these large media networks, especially over the past year, although this is the second time in my life that I've had a connection with this network. I'll tell you about the network in a second, but I will tell you that the first time I connected with them was when I used to be a radio announcer for WRGN radio up in northeastern Pennsylvania. They're in Sweet Valley, Pennsylvania. Loved working with WRGN. And there was this media group that used to provide one of our news feeds. And I was responsible. I was the production director and announcer. And so I was in charge of putting these things on the air. So I was familiar with them from long ago. So this is back in like 2021 or no, 2001. Wow. That went quickly. 2001 and 2002. That's back when I used to work for WRGN in 2003, that range. Lovely time. Loved it. But anyway, I'll get into that network in just a second. Let me set this up by telling you what led to this. Then I'm going to give you the behind the scenes, and I think you're going to find it useful for what you're building online. But let's start with podcasts. Podcasts continue to grow in popularity, and for more than a decade, they have been, personally, for me, one of my favorite ways to consume content. There are all kinds of shows that I listen to regularly as I talk to people. They used to not know about podcasts, but people tell me frequently that they listen to a lot of shows. Even my own children have gotten into listening to podcasts, which I think is pretty cool. I have to also say that many of the practical ideas that I've implemented in my life and implemented in my business over the past decade were inspired by what I heard on the podcasts that I listened to. And so soon after I started listening to podcasts, I actually got the bug to begin creating content myself. I wanted to start doing that. My first show was about building, just kind of building yourself into a healthy leader. So it was principles of healthy leadership. I did that show for a little while and really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed creating content for that show. And when I decided that it was time to finish that show, I also decided I didn't want that content to go to waste. So I collected all that content, all my show notes, all of that, and I published it into a book called Intentional Leadership. You can find that book on Amazon. It's called Intentional Leadership, and it's just based on the leadership principles that I shared on my original podcast. But now, and you'll see where I'm going with this discussion of podcasts in just a second. After several months of producing that leadership podcast, after I started producing that show, I actually started recording the first of several faith-based podcasts. And each of the faith-based podcasts I started creating, I still create. They're all active still. And those shows, I'm thankful to God, they caught on in a major way. They continue to be a major focus for me at present. I literally work on those shows every single day of the week. I work on them every day. 2 of the shows are daily. 1 of the shows is weekly with sometimes a bonus second episode per week. And I love it. Work on them all the time. And in 2023, in April of 2023, I was invited to join something. It was a podcasting network that is connected to a major media company. The podcasting network that I was invited to be part of is called the Life Audio Podcasting Network. So if you listen to any of my faith-based shows, you know they all start off with that branding. You hear the voice come on that says Life Audio, and then it goes into the show. Well, the Life Audio Podcasting Network is part of a larger group. There's a larger media group that oversees that. It's called the Salem Media Group. They are actively partnering together with me to increase the reach of my shows and to help me serve a much broader audience than ever before, which is wonderful. I'm immensely grateful for that. And several times a year, I have meetings with the leaders at Salem. And I'm going to take you behind the scenes on my most recent meeting that I actually had with them. And what we end up doing in these meetings is we talk about the shows, we talk about how the shows are doing, we discuss different ideas, we make plans for the ongoing growth of the shows and some of the other kinds of content that I create. And I have to tell you, if you are in the process of building an online platform, even if podcasting isn't part of your plan, but if you're in the process of building an online platform, I actually thought you might be interested in learning more about what was discussed at our most recent meeting. I actually think you're going to find it rather insightful. Now, one of the things that I appreciate about working with Salem is that they have a big vision. I tend to be a big vision kind of person. They tend to be big vision kind of people. And I love the fact that they have a big vision for what they're doing online. They're always in process of improving what they're doing and expanding what they're doing. And they're not just trying to do one thing. That's another thing I really appreciate about them. They actually understand that in the world of media, especially online media, it's valuable to offer content in multiple ways. And so that's something that they're doing. By the way, if you've been listening to this podcast for any length of time, we've been doing this podcast for a few years now, and you've probably noticed that that's something that I emphasize in platform launchers as well, the idea of offering content in multiple ways. That's why we talk about releasing content in written form, whether that be through newsletters or email lists or through blog posts or through some of your social media or through publishing books, right? We talk about releasing content in written form. And then we also talk about releasing content in audio form. Sometimes that can be podcasts, it could be audio courses, it could be interviews. We also talk about releasing content as video. Again, that could be courses, it could be having a YouTube channel. It could be something that you do related to vlogging or video podcasting, all of that. And we encourage that. We encourage people to do all of those, or at least a portion of these, all at the same time. Audio, written, video, all at the same time. Try it in different spheres and don't just focus on one thing. Let these things work together. Build some synergy as the different elements of your online platform actually cooperate. And I have to compliment Salem because they're doing that exact same thing. That's exactly the approach that they take. And I told them the other day, I said, this is one of the reasons why I enjoy working with you guys so much. I enjoy it because we share a similar philosophy. We go about this in a similar way. And they've been doing it for a very long time, and I really love their approach. So we sat down, we had our meeting, and they laid out a growth strategy for my shows. And that show, or that strategy for the shows, involves making sure that my shows are connected to their different websites and to the different forms of content they're producing. So we discussed different ways to do that. And I'll give you an example here. And this was something that I was really impressed with. I did mention this a few months ago when I noticed this pattern taking place, but let me tell you a little bit more about it. So for instance, several months ago, I noticed a huge spike in downloads of my podcast, Dwell on These Things. It's one of my faith-based shows called Dwell on These Things. It's typically episodes are about 45 minutes long. I release them every Monday, and then sometimes I release a bonus episode on Thursdays, but there's always a Monday episode. And I noticed one particular week, not that long ago, on a daily basis, I was hitting new download records every day. It was beating its previous record each day. And I thought, wow, this is amazing. What's going on here? And that growth seemed to come out of the blue. And I was trying to figure out what's contributing to this. Well, there were several things contributing to it, but one of the major things contributing to it was the fact that Salem decided to embed one of my episodes on a highly visible page on one of their websites. And that decision to embed the show's content, it contributed, and I think this number is almost exactly right, it contributed to about 70,000 downloads in the next 7 to 10 days after they embedded that episode on one of their pages. So they embedded it on one of their pages, and it was like 70,000 downloads. Now, I'm a big Philadelphia Eagles fan. Please forgive me if you're not an Eagles fan. Most people I discover are not ambivalent about the Eagles. They either love them or hate them. I love them. And their stadium, you know how many people their stadium hosts? Their stadium can seat 70,000 people, roughly. And so I thought when I saw that number, that in that week-long, 10-day maybe stretch, that 70,000 downloads of that podcast were partially attributed to the fact that Salem embedded a link to that podcast, a player that was playing that podcast on one of their popular pages. I thought, that would be like being given a microphone to speak to a very full Lincoln Financial Field, the home of the Philadelphia Eagles. And it was a very successful experiment. It was something that they attempted on their end. They noticed the metric. They noticed that it was going up. They were impressed with it. I was impressed with it. I was very grateful. And so in light of that successful experiment, part of what we talked about in our meeting was that Salem decided that they're going to do more of that. They're going to embed more of my shows in more places on their websites. So that's a strategy that's useful to think about. Think about that if you have a blog. Think about that if you have a website. Think about that if you're in charge of other web properties, or if you're connected with other people's websites and you're interested in co-promoting each other's content. Embed some of the content into some of the written pages, blog posts, things like that on your website. Here's another aspect of their approach, or a few other aspects, actually. And as I share these things, tell me, again, if some of these sound familiar to you, because, again, these are the type of things that I recommend here all the time. These are the type of things that we talk about in Platform Launchers. We talk about them in our members club. I talk about them in my books and in my podcasts and in some of the training and the courses that I put together. These are principles that absolutely work. And if you aren't implementing ideas like these, I would absolutely encourage you to give them a try. Even if you can't do all of them, do some of them, because they're very beneficial. But these are some of the other things behind the scenes in that meeting that we were talking about. Now, I'll give you 5 of them. Here's number 1. They updated my bio on one of their most popular websites, and they decided to include an embedded player that links to one of my podcasts in that bio. Now, the website is Christianity.com. That's a very popular website. If you go to Christianity.com, you will see my content featured there in multiple places now. And they decided to update my bio on Christianity.com. They get 140 million visits to that website per month, by the way. And now they're going to have links to my Chapter a Day audio Bible podcast in with my biography, if someone clicks on, contributors. And if you go to that website, if you go to Christianity.com, you'll see on the left side of the page that it lists the contributors, and you can see me there. And you'll see that they have now linked one of my podcasts in that bio. So they said, we think that's going to gain more visibility and more traction for it and allow more people to be exposed to its content. I thought that was a great idea. And they've basically got links to it right from the homepage of Christianity.com. I imagine that's going to help immensely. In fact, I noticed it immediately. As soon as they did it, I think they updated it yesterday, and I noticed that there were probably about 1,000 additional downloads just from that just yesterday. Number 2, here's something else that came out of that meeting. So each week, they are taking the blog post that I share at my site, BibleStudyHeadquarters.com. I share a new blog post at that site every single week, and they've decided to import it over to their website with a few minor formatting edits. So sometimes they'll change the title a little bit, or they'll format it a little bit differently, but essentially it remains unchanged. There's just a few minor things. And they import it from BibleStudyHeadquarters.com over to Christianity.com, make a few formatting edits, and then there it is. And at the end of their post, so when they import it over, at the end of each one of those posts, they create a backlink back to my website. And that's wonderful for many reasons, including the fact that it helps with domain authority. So if another site creates a link to your website, that's called a backlink, and it builds your domain authority, and then it increases traffic to your site. And so that's been happening now with some of my content on Christianity.com. They're doing that over to BibleStudyHeadquarters.com. They're also sharing an embedded player that features the most recent episode of Dwell on These Things at the bottom of each one of those posts that they import over. So you see they're creating the backlink and they're putting that. And when I talk about an embedded player, I'm just talking about a player that just fits right into the code of that site. So if somebody's reading that site, they don't even have to leave the site to actually listen to the episode. There's just a play button. They could press play and it just plays right from that page, and they don't have to go to a different page. So that's called an embedded player. And they've been doing that now at the base, right at the bottom of each one of those posts that they import over. So that's certainly helpful. Their newsletter is a third thing that they've been utilizing as part of their growth strategy. That newsletter, I am not certain how many people are on it. I do know that it numbers in the millions and it reaches millions of people each week. And so now, on occasion, what they're doing is they're dedicating some of that space to highlight one of my shows or one of my blog posts. And so they're doing that on the newsletter. And when they do that in their newsletter, that again sends traffic to the things that I'm doing. Very exciting. Again, their most popular website is Christianity.com. And so a fourth thing they're doing is on the front page of Christianity.com, they're featuring me as a contributor. I just mentioned that. But they're also placing the cover art to one of my shows across the bottom of the page. Now, they update that from time to time. So sometimes it's there, sometimes it's not there. But I noticed they're also doing that on Crosswalk.com, which is another one of their sites. And they're putting cover art to my podcasts across the bottom of the page. And or there, if my cover art isn't directly there, they have a link that says, here's a link to some other popular podcasts, and you click the link and there my stuff is. So they're using two very popular websites, web properties that they have, to promote three of my shows. Here's a fifth thing that they decided to do, and this is kind of exciting. They asked me to record a brief ad for my book, Walking in Wisdom. Right now I'm giving digital copies away of that book at BibleStudyHeadquarters.com. So if you actually go to the website, BibleStudyHeadquarters.com, you'll be able to download a free digital copy. But the ad that I recorded is going to be played on the network, on the Life Audio Network. And other people will hear it, and they'll be encouraged to stop by my website, grab a free copy of the book. And then when readers grab a free copy of the book, they can also begin receiving my weekly online devotion in their inbox, which from my standpoint, I think is highly beneficial, because instead of it just being a one-time interaction, it gives me the opportunity to serve people long-term. It gives me the opportunity to build a long-term connection with people who download the book. And I really like that opportunity. So as we discuss these things, these were part of their growth strategies and how they're using multiple platforms to market other things. And I really like the way they were doing that. And by the way, I didn't even mention this. I can mention this as a sixth thing. They're doing these little previews of my show that can be put into the feed of other shows. And so other shows on the network are promoting my show, and then my show is promoting other shows on the network. Super helpful as well. But as we discuss these things, I actually mentioned to them that I was really pleased and really impressed with how they run their media enterprise. I was, again, familiar with them from when I worked at the radio station years ago. We used to run their news programs. But what they're doing is, and they own hundreds of radio stations, by the way. So big websites, hundreds of radio stations, a podcasting network. They have their own print publications, so their own publishing house, whole bunch of things, right? But they're following the approach that I'm convinced works best. They make the effort to provide valuable content in various ways through regularly updated websites and online portals. Their content is relevant. Their content is fresh. Their content is easy to access and delivered very consistently without fail. They always deliver at the same time, all the time. And people know you can count on them to actually do that. That's something, if we're in the process of developing online content, that consistency of delivering at the same time, that's something to always keep in mind. That's the approach that I'm convinced will work for just about anyone who decides to build an online platform, as long as you're focused on providing valuable content to others in multiple ways and then deliver it at consistent times. I also expressed my appreciation to them for one other thing. And that's the fact that they choose to ethically monetize what they do, because it's very costly what they're doing. It's not free. There are all kinds of expenses involved, but those expenses can be paid for through the funds that they're raising through advertising, through the funds that they're raising through business partnerships. That also frees them up to be able to hire people to manage much of what they do. So they have editors and producers and people that are delivering content and people that are helping with marketing and all sorts of things. And so I like the way they monetize because it's a very ethical way to monetize how they're approaching their online media. All that being said, I just thought it'd be kind of interesting to take a look at this because that's a behind the scenes look at what's working with a very large media company. They're very large, they're very successful. And the more I've had the opportunity to see what they're doing, the more I realize they're doing things the right way. And it's a privilege to be able to work with them. But I just wanted to mention that to you because I know that if you're listening to this podcast, if you're watching us on YouTube, odds are you're interested in online platform development. So please notice their patterns. Please notice that approach. Again, this is the kind of approach that we utilize here at Platform Launchers as well. It's also the kind of approach I think we should all consider if we're trying to build message-based online platforms that reach people in multiple ways. So think about that. Listen to this episode more than once. Just kind of think through some of the steps that I mentioned there and ways in which cross promotion is working with a large media group. That's the type of thing that you don't have to be connected to a large media group to do that kind of cross promotion. You could do it for yourself. You could also partner with other people who do similar things to you. And as you do that, you find that the synergy of those things working together really does gain exposure for the content that you're trying to share with others and be a blessing to other people with. So that is it for us this week. Love having the opportunity to chat about these things on our podcast here. Again, you could stop over at platformlaunchers.com and you can check out all the fun stuff that we have over there. We've got courses, we've got coaching, we've got our membership community, we've got all sorts of media, podcasts, videos, the whole thing. It really will help you build, grow, and monetize your online platform. And again, we'd love to see you jump in our group at some point. If you haven't already done so, we'd love to see you here as well. But that's it for us this week. Thanks again for tuning in. We look forward to catching up with you again right here next time. And in the meantime, have a wonderful week. Take care. We look forward to seeing you really, really soon. Take care.